Hi class, my name is James Tidy and today I'm going to be discussing Stockton v. Stockton versus Barbour County Board of Education. Some facts about this case. It's about a boy named Carl Blaze Stockton. He was also known as Blaze. He suffers from multiple disabilities including obsessive compulsive disorder, behavior disorder, Tourette syndrome, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. He also had a couple of learning disabilities in math and reading, but it didn't really go into detail about those, so I decided to keep those out. Blaze attended Philip Barbour Middle School from 7th to 8th grade, but wasn't getting the special services he needed. It took 2 different trials, then Blaze was able to get the services he required to succeed in his schooling. The issue. The basic legal question regarding what specific provision of law is to be decided in this case was Blaze being allowed to free appropriate education and also being granted with the materials needed to accommodate his needs. I felt as though this issue was really a main problem because every student should be offered FAPE, which is that free appropriate education, and this was something that it was almost as if Blaze was getting stripped of. In order to continue on, Miss Stockton, also his mother, granted the school system time to push the hearing date further, and the new hearing date was set to December 13th, 1993, allowing the school enough time for appropriate testing. During this time, Ms. Stockton was given 3 evaluators for a multidisciplinary assessment, a neurological examination, a neuropsychological examination, and testing ran by Pathway, which was a private school that they were hoping to get Blaze to attend. All 3 of the evaluators came to the conclusion that Blaze would do better in a residential setting instead of the public classroom, although the school psychologist thought otherwise. Dr. Elizabeth Mason made claims that Blaze's educational needs could be met within the public school setting, and a psychiatrist from Virginia who had previously looked over Blaze's files testified with Dr. Mason, explaining how Blaze could be given proper educational needs, such as a less restrictive environment, intensified counseling, a push of more peer groups, and assistance at home as well as after-school activities. So the school psychologist and the psychiatrist ended up really pushing that he could do a lot better in a public school setting when there was data to actually support that he really wouldn't unless he was able to get the services that they were saying he needed, and that there was proof that he was able to get those services. The holding. The answer to the logical question of if Blaze was obtaining a free and appropriate education was no. He was unable to obtain FAPE until the last hearing was put into place, making the IEP team not only update Blaze's IEP to what he needed, but also providing new special services for Blaze in order to help him succeed. Although the previous hearing was in Blaze's favor, there was no change in order to make sure Blaze was getting the special services needed. With the updated form of Blaze's IEP, as well as the put into use accommodations, Blaze was able to succeed. So it did take 2 hearings in order to establish something that would work out for Blaze. The first hearing, they wanted to incorporate a lot of in things in the classroom, like the things that I listed off, such as those peer pushes and stuff like that. But there was no documentation that they were actually put into play. It was more of just they said that they were going to do it, but they never actually did. And so they really saw a decrease in Blaze's grades, and he started to act out more because of the fact that he wasn't getting the services that he needed in order to succeed in his schooling. The rationale. The case reached a holding because the second hearing examiner, Anne Wareham Lambright, came to the understanding that Blaze's placement in Pathway was not justified, as well as Blaze not needing or requiring a residential placement. The rules of law announced in the case were 20 U.S.C.S. 1412 5b and Fed R. Civ P 665. So 20 U.S.C.S. 1412 5b states that for each student, IEPs must be developed and created and updated by school boards. Which I actually did look that it's not only school boards, but it also could be an IEP team or the IEP specialist, aka the special education teacher. And then for Fed R. Civ P65, This explains that the money that was put into really anything regarding this case, as well as the special services needed for Blaze to be successful, will be given back to the family by the state. The party that wins according to that rule, given the facts of the case being heard, would be Blaze. So in the first hearing, it was definitely in Blaze's favor, but the only thing was it just didn't go, nothing was being done. So what they said would be done wasn't being done, so it ended up taking a toll on Blaze's success in his academics. Blaze was granted the special services he needed and is now able and has been successful in his schooling ever since the hearing was issued. So it really seemed as though it took this, the second hearing, and this Anne Wareham Lambright lady, the examiner, to really push that there is no proof that he was getting his services. He wasn't accelerating like he should. He wasn't increasing in his grades. Nothing was showing that he was doing better because nothing was being done to help him improve. So she really went in there and decided to, his IEP needs to be updated and it needs to be facts, because another issue that was being brought up constantly was every time the IEP team would meet, they wouldn't know how to really go about it. So they would just keep pushing it off and saying that they're going to do it this day, and then they'd push it off to a later date, and then a later date, and nothing was getting done. How it shapes special education today. Stockton by Stockton versus Barber County Board of Education helped shape education today by really pushing FAPE and allowing every student the opportunity to obtain the special services and needs that the given student needs in order to succeed. In this case, Blaze's needs weren't getting met not only by his IEP team, but also by the state, which ended with Blaze not getting much help after the first trial. It wasn't until the second that there was a realization that Blaze needed more support than was anticipated. And it wasn't even that he needed more support, it was that he needed support in general. I think a lot of the specialists didn't know where to go because there was so many different kinds of disabilities. And then to top it all off, he did have those learning disabilities in both math and reading. So that really made it difficult. But at the same time, he still needs services in order to be able to succeed, whether he has the disabilities or not, which in this case he did. Not only was Blaze not getting the support he needed, but this also brought attention to the problem that his IEP was not being up to date. So during the first hearing, they went back and tried to see what his goals were, such like that, but nothing was really up to date because they were having the problem of they didn't really know how to formulate an IEP for somebody who had so many different needs. There were multiple times where the IEP team would meet together and not come up with a valid form of service education for Blaze, and that resulted in a lot of time being wasted because of the need to keep pushing the IEP determination date out further and further. This is why there are such things as evaluations, and excuse me if I'm wrong with the terming, but triennial evaluations, which are like the 3-year evals, to make sure that the students are constantly getting up-to-date support, as well as making sure that what is happening on the IEP is actually what's going on. So I know we have the yearly or the annual evaluations, which are basically we'll go through and update anything that needs to be updated with parents, and then they have their 3-year evals. But it seemed as though none of that was being done, and if it was, then there was no communication with the parents, which is something that needs to play a big role because us as educators need to keep the parents in the loop and update them on what we change, what we don't change, things like that. Some comments I had about this case study. I don't agree at all with a lot of the mistakes that were made by the school board, and these are definitely a lot of mistakes that I now know and will avoid in the future. The main problem that I feel needed to be addressed within this whole case study is how Blaze could get the support he needed in the present situation. I felt as though instead of worrying so much about the case, they needed to worry more about the student and why isn't he getting these needs met, and what do you have to do in order to get these needs met, instead of arguing back and forth about, well, I think this, I think that. No, we need to think about what's best for the student and what we can put into terms so that he will be able to succeed. The case study has definitely opened my eyes and made present to me how things can escalate so quickly if all measures aren't taken, like they should be. I've always known that there are very strict steps that you need to take, especially in special education. Um, and I've always known that there has been a lot of legal issues in the back in the day because of the fact that the certain steps weren't taken by certain teachers, things like that. But this really showed me that like you really have to be on top of what you're doing and you really need to care for these kids in order to help them succeed. In the end, I want all of my students to feel loved and supported in whatever they're doing. And another thing that I would love to do and I plan on incorporating in my classroom is I want my parents, the parents of my students, not my parents, the parents of my students to be able to communicate with me when things might be off, when they feel as though this needs to change. Especially with those IEP meetings, I feel like parent information or parent given information is always such a big deal, and we really need to take that and run with it because the parents are going to know their students best. And I feel like this is also a really good way to be successful at our job is really make sure that we're communicating with with the parents and making sure that what we're doing is for the kids and not for our own self. Thank you guys.